Hi, I'm Lisa K. Donner, along with Jeff Charles, James Fight, Sarah Cowgill, and Andrew Moran. And this is the Conservative Five, Liberty Nation's online TV news program. The Biden administration has created one disaster after another in the desire to overturn anything former President Trump put into place. But all those Scranton Joe special touches are beginning to alarm a lot of folks out there. Take, for instance, the latest tactic employed to make illegal immigrants simply vanish into thin air with a wink and a nod. Instead of sending hopeful illegals back to Mexico to wait their turn in the pop-up tent court, Mr. Biden is shipping plane loads of migrants on midnight flights to locations around the country. This behavior naturally seems a bit shady to many Americans. The New York Post observed two planes at the Westchester County Airport and reported those exiting the aircraft seemed to be young children and teenagers. After digging into flight data, it seems that the last 2 weeks, 2,000 underage and unaccompanied minors have landed at the airport outside white planes. Well, our very own man in the Lone Star State may have something to say about the immigration shuffle under cover of darkness. Jeff, is this going to be the norm? Out of sight, out of mind, crisis averted?
Well, Lisa, it's already been the norm. I mean, you might recall earlier this year, even the activist media was criticizing President Biden because he wasn't allowing reporters to go in and look at the detention facilities. There has been a remarkable lack of transparency when it comes to the migrant crisis, even to the point to where they still refuse to even call it a crisis. I mean, even Chris Magnus, who Biden tapped to be to head up the Customs and Border Patrol, he wouldn't even call it a crisis. He called it a bad situation. I can't remember the exact words he used, but this is the modus operandi of this administration when it comes to immigration. And in this particular issue, it's kind of confusing to me because they did it under cover of night, like you said, but these were children. I would understand being secretive if they were adults that they're just doing the catch and release with and flying them into the country. But when it comes to children, I think most people tend to have a different view towards that. And I don't think that this would be as controversial because when we have the unaccompanied minors, that's always been the issue, getting them with their sponsors or with their families. He was getting criticized because that wasn't happening fast enough. So in this case, I'm not sure why they felt the need to sneak this in. I mean, maybe somebody sees something that I don't see.
Sarah, does it make sense to you that people would want to take possession of their unaccompanied minor or their ward or their sponsorship person at 4 a.m.?
No, none of this makes any sense, except if you look at it in the other direction, which is we're separating children. We've already separated them at the border. We've got to do something with them before somebody busts us on separating children. So they don't want the optics. I mean, if this administration was doing the right thing in the right way, they would do it in the daylight and notify the press.
Andrew, are any migrant immigrants showing up at the Toronto airport?
Well, that was actually a few years ago where a lot of people from South America, they were traveling through the United States and then they snuck into the Canadian border in Quebec. So we did have our own issue from illegal immigrants. But on the issue of children, it must be absolutely terrifying for them to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning and get on these flights in a place they have no idea where they're even going. So I feel for these kids 100%. I just think that overall, this is part of the whole socialist ideology where Texas is the one that had been suffering the most when it came to the border crisis. But now, because socialism is about equal misery, Joe Biden he wants the rest of the country to have equal misery with the border crisis. He's spreading this illegal immigration and this migrant surge to New York, to the East Coast, to the West Coast, everywhere across the country. So no longer is Texas the one going through this. Everybody's going through this. And actually, as a matter of fact, Senator Ted Cruz, he recently introduced a bill wanting illegal immigrants to go into Democratic communities. So that would perhaps encourage Democrat voters or Democratic politicians finally to tackle this issue correctly.
Yeah, I can just imagine a lot of immigrant kids running around the Upper West Side. Jim, what's happening in Arkansas? Any secret plane loads of children coming your way?
Well, I don't think there are any secret plane loads here. But Jeff raised a good question. If the issue if one of the issues has been the whole kids in cages thing, well, why isn't this being shouted from the rooftops? And I think the reason is that this is just a matter of trying to make the whole issue go away, the bigger border security issue. This is just a symptom of a much larger issue. So, the Democrats, Joe Biden, Democrats in Congress, and then of course, anyone who ever admitted to voting for Biden have kind of backed themselves in a corner. So they've said, oh, there's no crisis for so long that now the only real choices left are to either say, okay, hey, look, there was a crisis, we're wrong, and either let's get some help, or here's what we're doing to solve it, or what they're actually doing is just keep on playing that fiddle while Rome burns, so to speak, and try to make as much of this go away as possible while nobody's paying attention.
Sarah, politically speaking, that's a good point, Jim, but politically speaking, did the Biden administration and the, Jen Psaki and all those people really think they were going to get away with this, that nobody was going to notice that plane loads of migrant kids were being taken all around the country, flown over all around the country in the dead of the night?
Well, I mean, if you look at the history of the Biden administration and Ms. Psaki and our activist media, they don't report on the stupid things that this administration does. They barely ask any kind of important questions. And so, yeah, they can get away with it as long as, somebody's not like the New York Post sitting out there with their little binoculars and night vision goggles, checking things out. And there's just not enough of the media that's not already, complicit with this administration. So you're not going to hear about it. If they don't hear about it, nobody else is going to hear about it.
That's
questions. My question is, how much is this all costing? To charter flights, you're paying for the gasoline, you're housing these you're housing these migrants. I remember seeing a few months ago, the cost of housing migrants is costing about $86 million in taxpayer money. So all this is you're subsidizing all this work, all this migration. What's going on? How can the U.S. even afford this at this time?
One thing that I'll say too is that, if this is what they got caught doing, how much stuff are they doing that doesn't get caught because the media doesn't really want to look into it? But I will say that I'm actually glad that they're getting these children to their families or whatever, because the way that they're being treated in these detention centers is atrocious.
Wait a minute. Do you really buy that they are actually meeting up with people? I don't buy that. I think they're just being housed in a different place in New York.
Yeah, I suspect some of them are, but some of them are for sure going to other detention centers and foster homes.
Yeah, these kids are they're political pawns, and they're not going to their parents. They're not going to a relative's house. They're going to somebody who will take them in and get a stipend for taking them in. And then sooner or later, everybody's going to get rid of those kids.
Well,
and the foster care is already dreadful.
I think there are children that fall into different categories. But what I'm saying is that the way that they've been treated in the actual detention centers, especially here in Fort Bliss, Texas, they've been subject to sexual assault, undercooked food, lice, all kinds of stuff. The Biden administration has presided over the abuse of these children. So even though I don't necessarily like the way he's handling it, I would rather them be somewhere where they're going to be safe, because it's just immoral.
Well, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris campaigned on the ease of illegal immigrants achieving citizenship, only to backpedal once they got in office and send out the mixed message, you're not welcome here. Thus, it's unsurprising that any confusion has brought nothing but chaos. Thanks, panel. That's it for our Conservative 5 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform, YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble. We're on them all. As well, Liberty Nation has its own Roku channel where you see all of our TV productions. Thanks for tuning in, and remember to surf on over to libertynation.com. Sign up for our new member zone, just $29.99 for the entire year. Special thanks to our fantastic editor and post coordinator, Frank Diorio, and our executive producer, Sarah Calgill. I'm Lisa K. Donner, editor-in-chief. Thanks so much for joining us today. This has been a production of libertynation.com, conservative news where truth matters.